a cloudy spring morning and I'm standing just beyond the car park at Forty Hall. This is Jason Peters, who's going to guide us round our walk.
Welcome to the Forty Hall estate. I'm the Learning Conservation Officer here. Now, my pleasure to take you around the estate on a guided tour. Here you go. The woodland in this area is regenerating. We have an aerial photograph from 1961 which shows only 7 trees in this area, but that has spread in the last 40 years, and in the foreground here you can see all the young seedlings which are growing. If the grassland area was mown for meadows, then obviously the trees would be cut down, but in this area they are regenerating. So this is an area of natural succession from one type of grassland habitat through into scrub, into woodland. So this is hornbeam, one of our native species of trees. We have quite a lot of it on the estate. It's endemic to the area, and this will grow up to be an upper story or upper canopy tree. Other plants you can see around here are elderberry to the left. That's a classic mid-story tree for this area. Has beautiful white flowers, and then you have the berries which come in the autumn. And in the background, the dark evergreen is our native holly. And that's an interesting plant for this area because historically it was a deer park. And deer browse, they don't really graze, they browse. And so the parker, the deer park owner or keeper, he would ensure that there was always holly on the estate so the deer had something to eat in winter. And it's often known as browsewood. So it's a possible indicator species of other sites where you have parkland and deer management and grazing historically.
So the deer particularly favour holly, do they?
It's more in winter. They need to have green sustenance.
Oh, of course.
So being evergreen, the other evergreens would be yew, but that's toxic, and so they don't generally graze on that, whereas holly is not poisonous to the deer. So behind me is a large crabapple tree, one of our native crabapples, and in my hand here is the fruit. When I first saw this, I got quite excited because we have on the estate the remains of a Tudor palace where Elizabeth I and Henry VIII used to frequent. And I was wondering whether it was a Tudor apple that they had actually bred locally. It's really quite large for a crabapple, and it's a bright red, which is unusual. Most crabapples are a green or yellow colour. So we're going to send this off to Kew Gardens for their analysis, and hopefully we'll get an answer pretty soon. This wonderful old tree in front of me here is a hawthorn. Common name is May tree, botanical name Protegus monogyna. You can tell from these incredible stems that this tree actually was laid at one time in its life as a hedge. And there was probably a hedge boundary running along very close to the roadway here. Beautiful old tree. Sadly, however, if they aren't hedged and cut, these trees will grow, mature, die and fall over. And that's what's happened here on the left-hand side. But sadly, these trees haven't been cut and pruned, so there's a lot of weight in the upper canopy, and in a storm they tend to blow over.
Sorry.
So your question was whether this is a natural form of a tree. Well, it depends on the context. Because if a tree is growing, let's say, naturally in a woodland, it's going to be tall and thin. If it's growing naturally in an area with the grassland around it where there's some grazing, keeping that grass there and stopping other trees growing, the tree can actually spread out. So this is what you class as woodland pasture as a habitat, a mixture of pasture grassland and mature trees. Whereas further up there we have the woodland, which is more dense tree planting. And we have an awful lot of muntjac. So muntjac again are an invasive non-native species. Yeah. They were brought into the Woburn Abbey estate in Bedfordshire by the Duke of Bedford, I believe, 4th Duke of Bedford, and they've slowly spread and colonised the area. And they're a problem in the extent that they graze so much of the woodland regeneration. So if you want to do coppicing in an area and you want those new shoots from ground level to grow up, so you have poles and you have all the biodiversity, the deer come in, especially the muntjac, and nibble, and in winter will actually shred all the bark, as the American grey squirrels do as well, and then you can possibly lose that habitat. Yeah. So another reason why I prefer to do pollarding on the Forty Hall estate is so then we don't have a conflict between the deer and the woodland. In front of us you can see blackthorn. I'll just walk in and show you. The common name is blackthorn. It has incredibly long spikes, or thorns, and that gives it the Latin name Prunus spinosa, meaning the spined cherry. Where I come from in Cambridgeshire, we know this as buckthorn because traditionally it was used as an enclosing hedge to go around deer parks where you'd have buck So the blossom that you see now on the blackthorn will shortly turn into dark green hard fruit, and by winter time there'll be beautiful ripe black berries called sloes. The sloes are used to flavour gin, so you have a bottle of gin, take out half the gin, mix it with sugar, add your berries which have been pricked with one of the thorns from the blackthorn, leave it for 6 months and you have a very potent but beautiful gin. So we're now on the Great Field, which recently has been mown as a hay meadow. Historically this area was parkland, so there would have been deer grazing here, and before that there was a lot of pasture and also arable agriculture, where you can see for the ridge and furrow that's behind me. The grass was cut in late summer to ensure that the seeds from last year's harvest would fall to the ground and grow again this year, so only a few little grass stalks remain. This one is called in the common English name cocksfoot, because when you hold it up in that direction, apparently it resembles the foot of a cockerel. Botanical name is Dactylus glomerata. So on the Great Field, the woodland pasture that was traditionally the parkland, we have an awful lot of ancient oak trees which are sadly dying from old age or also from possible drought. This is called a stag's horn tree because the top of the tree dies back and it resembles a stag's horn. We like to leave these on the estate as they're great refuge and habitat for insects, beetles, birds, hibernating bats and the like. We have a lot of these trees where there are possible danger near to a public footpath. Sadly, we have to cut the upper branches off to make them safe, but the main trunk and the stem of the tree we retain for wildlife. There's a lot of scrub that grows underneath these trees. Here you can see brambles or blackberries, elderberries as well, and these are all the mid-story canopy trees. It's interesting that alder and willow both have very snappable wood, let's say.
Yeah.
And that wood will regenerate and grow even without roots. So if you imagine a tree growing on a river system, if the branches snap off and float down the stream, it's actually propagating itself up and down, or down the watercourse. Yeah.
There's a lot of lichen on that tree, Jason. Is that actually harmful to the tree?
No, not at all. This is a beautiful old oak tree, and the lichen that's growing on it is in no way affecting the tree itself because it's living on the very surface of the skin of the outer bark of the tree. And lichen is actually a symbiosis, so a beneficial partnership between a fungus and an algae. The rate of growth of lichen is really quite slow, a few millimetres a year. So you can kind of guesstimate how old the lichen plant is by looking at the radius or half its diameter. So this champion oak tree here in the woodland pasture is an absolutely brilliant example of how an English oak tree can grow if it's not shaded or surrounded by other trees and open pasture. You can see lots of horizontal low boughs coming across the ground. They're not touching the ground because historically this area was grazed either by deer, cattle or sheep, and they would have nibbled off all the low-growing tips of the shoots as they were growing. But around the base of the tree you can see this ring of young oak saplings. These are simply from the acorns that have been dropped down perhaps by the tree itself or even planted by jays, the bird. What we're going to do for these trees is most of them will be taken out to ensure we still retain the pasture, but we'll keep 3 or 4 specimens so that in a couple of 100 years' time, when the mother tree has died, there'll still be a few big oak trees here for future generations to enjoy. There's a close-up detail of the beautiful old bark of the oak tree. And in ancient woodland management, bark was a very useful material because it's full of tannins, which are a preservative. So in a woodland context, a lot of the oaks wouldn't be allowed to grow up and mature. They would actually be cut down, or the bark would be stripped to collect the tannins for preserving leather. In forest law, only certain people are allowed to do that. The process is known as barking. And so if you went to the wrong area of the woodland that was actually under forest law, you would be barking up the wrong tree. It's got nothing to do with dogs. It comes down to actually harvesting the bark resource and using it for your trade. One plant that's very typical on woodland pasture is mistletoe. Mistletoe is spread, the berries and the seeds are spread by birds going from tree to tree as they fly across the pastoral area. So here we've got mistletoe growing on hawthorn tree. The hawthorn sadly is slowly falling over. So if you look down towards the back of Turkey Brook, in the silhouette you can see every ball or lump that's growing on that tree is actually a mistletoe plant. Mistletoe is not necessarily a parasite. It's classed as being semi or hemi-parasitic. As you can see, it's green, which means it photosynthesizes light and produces its own food. But its roots are not in the ground, they're actually going into the stem or bark of the tree. And in summer, when the tree comes into leaf, they'll be sucking out the moisture and the sugars which the tree is providing as a free service. Some people say that mistletoe can kill trees, and I have seen trees in Poland or elsewhere on the continent where the whole tree is covered to the extent that the branches die off. Here, however, it's a very treasured plant. It's locally rare, it's one of our biodiversity action plan species, and so we're doing what we can to ensure that we have the habitat and the plants that grow there. So catkins are produced on plants that use the wind for cross-pollination. So the pollen is produced within the catkin, and you can see here the catkins are all being pushed out and hanging down low. This is so the wind will pass through, suck out the pollen, which will float on the air, come to the next tree and will land on the next catkin, and therefore you have fertilization. So this is things like hazel, for alder and the like. So the water feature here is the Turkey Brook, which feeds into the River Lee, which itself feeds into the River Thames. At the moment the water level is kind of average. This winter we had the highest flood levels in memory for the last 40-50 years, and the water's actually up to where I'm standing here. So it's quite a fluctuating water body. Historically, or traditionally, this whole water body has been managed and manipulated through time, through people, from having mill chasers, mill ponds and weirs. The benefit of having a weir is that you have a body of water higher up that's a constant depth. And so this year, as part of the restoration works through the Heritage Lottery Fund, we're going to reinstate a weir, which means that in summer, even if the water level goes very low, we still have a depth of water that's great for wildlife. This was the line coming down the Lime Avenue. So just pan round. The lime trees in front of us, these are the trees of the mistletoe at the top, which we were looking at earlier on with the mistletoe in the distance. You can imagine that each tree there represents where a bird has come down and wiped its beak, which contained the berry of another mistletoe plant, wiped it into the bark, and then that seed has germinated and grown to enter the tree halfway up. The Lime Avenue itself is an 18th century design feature implemented by the Breton family when the estate had its last major landscape rehaul. So the Lime Avenue is the largest design feature on the entire estate, and it provides a wonderful view, a vista that's focused and channeled up to the wonderful Forty Hall.